welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am in airplane mode, and I am joined by a man who needs no introduction, evidently, because he didn't write one. A man who needs no introduction. How are you doing today, my one black friend?
I'm very well. Thank you so much, Pocket Locker. Good to see you. How are you today?
Good to see you. I'm all right. I'm hanging in there. So today's video. So we did a video a while ago. I don't know if we did it on this show or on the stream, but it was called "What If Christians Were 100% Honest?" And it was a Jubilee video, like a bunch of Christians went in with masks on, and then they were all dark, and then they were asked certain questions, whether they agree or disagree with it, and then they had to indicate yes or no. It was actually really interesting because, you know, the idea is that they have the anonymity so they can respond how they really want to respond, and then, you know, say how they really feel. It was a really good video. Uncle Bobby actually did a review of it as well this week. And I went to go check out if they had anything else interesting. And they had this thing on what if white men were 100% honest? Sort of like the same type of deal. And you know, we've been not talking about racism enough in this community, as far as I'm concerned. We've been dealing with a lot of racism, but we haven't been talking about it. And certainly, a lot of us feel like there's a demographic issue in our community. It's not necessarily everybody's bad, but the community's got a lot of white men in it, and most of the atheist YouTubers we watch are white men. And so I think this will be an interesting thing to get into, as far as, you know, an opportunity for us to think about how they respond to these issues, an opportunity for the community to think about how people they interact would respond to these issues. And yeah, I don't know. That's the setup. So do you want to jump into it, or did you have anything to say?
No, I think most of the population in this country is, in the United States, in case you're somewhere else and you don't know where we are, is white people. So statistically, I think that's just what you're going to see.
Yeah, and they're also the most segregated, according to some statistics I've seen. So
really,
yeah, they're the most likely to live. I mean, think about it. They move. I think it's on purpose, right? They move to areas with nice neighborhoods and nice schools, and due to everybody does it, right? But if they do it, you know, they end up by themselves due to, you know, historic factors. But yeah, there's been I'm not sure where that statistics comes from, but yeah, that they're, you know, school districts and neighborhoods are more segregated. You know, minorities tend to live around other minorities, right? All right, let's go ahead and jump into this. I think this is an old clip. Here we go.
Brought together 7 strangers, protected their identities, and created a space for them to be completely honest. What will be revealed when they take the mask off?
Also, Steph, if you want to jump in, that's cool. We're in Gathered in the cafe.
Everyone is racist, including me.
I'm not, like... All right, blue is disagree, red is agree. So 3 of them agree that everyone is racist, and 4 disagree.
Nobody wants to think of themselves as racist, and I don't think that I'm racist in the way that I think we think about racism, but I think I took the question as these, like...
It's just so confusing. Blue should be agree, red should be disagree. There's semantic value to colors. Red means stop, bad, or don't.
Nobody wants to think of themselves as racist, and I don't think that I'm racist in the way that I think we think about racism, but I think I took the question as these, like, inherent biases that everybody has, and I think most of the time, most people are not aware of this.
It's weird. I think there's like this new generational divide of like, you are a racist or you said a racist thing. And I don't know where the line is. You might say something a little racist or something you don't see as racist. Someone calls you out and you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, you know, apologize. And if you argue that point against them, then I would say you're a racist. But if you understand, you come to understanding, you learn, everyone should be able to forgive that person and be like, no, you made a mistake. People make mistakes. I don't know. I feel like it's a binary now.
I think a really important thing that kind of is tough with cancel culture right now is that road to redemption. And so after you've said something wrong, you know, how do you?
All right. This is just weird, and again, it's all we're going to be talking about perspective, but it's weird. When I hear the question, is everybody a racist? What a lot of times we're thinking about is, and I got to do this just for the sake of thoroughness so that people understand where we're coming from. Let's look up racism definition. You'll see why I'm doing this. Right. So the definition we get is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is minority or marginalized. Right? So this is immediately going to be a problem for a lot of people, because for a lot of us, that last part, typically one that is a minority or marginalized, is a problem. And it means that just because a bunch of Puerto Ricans, let's say, don't like a bunch of Italian guys, a lot of people would say that you got to be dealing with a minority or marginalized group. So there's a distinction where I think when everybody says everybody's racism or it's a spectrum and we're all on it, maybe what they mean to be talking about is prejudice, and there's a prejudice spectrum that we're all on, but these are all going to get interesting. All right, here's another one quickly for you. Prejudice versus plus power. All right, now if you go to prejudice plus power, you'll see prejudice plus power, also known as R for racism equals P plus P, is a stipulative definition of racism used in the United States, often by white anti-racism activists. Patricia Bidal Padva first proposed this definition in a 1970 book where she defined racism as prejudice plus institutional power. According to this definition, two elements are required in order for racism to exist: racial prejudice and social power to codify and enforce this prejudice into an entire society. Adherents write that while all people can be racially prejudiced, minorities are powerless, and therefore only white people have the power to be racist. This definition is supposed to be is supported by the argument that power is responsible for the process of racialization, and that social power is distributed in a zero-sum game. All right, so that's what we're dealing with here, where a lot of times I think people who, again, and I brought this up because I did a video about Sam Richards, who my dog is named after, who's a sociologist of race that was one of my mentors at Penn State. And I taught and facilitated dialogues in the Race Relations Project, and that is the operating definition of racism, is prejudice plus power. It's what I also call the sociological definition. So what I'm experiencing here is also in a difference with a lack of perspective, in addition to a difference in perspective, is a difference in education, to where for a lot of people, somebody says something racial, white boys this, Italian dudes that, Jewish people this or that, and to them, they've conflated racial and racist. Whereas a lot of us that are, we're gonna be working on, from a feminist perspective, from a sociological perspective, from a political perspective, where our definition of racism is very different because it's been informed. And so this is another thing, sort of like evolution, where there's a technical definition of the term, and then there's the layman's version of the term. The other thing I think is really interesting is you see where a lot of these talking points come out, right? Because for this dude, the last dude that we're on right now, Johnny, to go straight into, well, one of the things with cancel culture it's just like really weird that this is where they immediately, these guys are jumping to a defensive position. They're asked about racism. It's immediately, well, well, every once in a while you say something, and well, where's the line between saying something and does that really make you racist? Is it a binary? In other words, the question immediately makes them jump to what happens to them when they say something racially insensitive. It's just a really interesting thing that, like, none of them are trying to take a step back and at least so far and talk about the bigger picture. It's all like the first thing that jumps to their mind is getting called out for saying something racist. It's just interesting. Did you have anything to add, my one black friend?
Well, I'm interested to see where this goes because his question, how do you make yourself right again in the public sphere? Maybe he's asking because he's done it.
Maybe. Yeah.
He's trying to fix something, right, that he broke or feels he broke in his life, or maybe someone dear to him has done so, and he's trying to, like, hey, what's the solution to get this person back on track and make them feel like they're a valuable contributor to society, or has that ship sailed and it's never going to be that way? So this guy might be trying to come to terms with his situation.
Which is why I like what the other guy said. Like, if somebody points something out to you, deal with it, apologize, and move on. Most people think you're good. It's when you double down and refuse to. That's what we've been dealing with lately. We've dealt with some people who pretended they didn't realize, for instance, that a raccoon could be a problematic racial image. Then it turns out, well, that's what they did on our channels. Then when they went on their channels, they were like, we knew all along, of course, we got them, right? And then when the whole thing finally got brought to a head, like, well, how do we resolve this? It was like, we'll just change the fucking avatar, right? And it was, no, I can't do that. It's my favorite cancel culture, woke. It was all this, and it's to that guy's point. Like, well, this is the problem because you're being insensitive at that point. It's been brought to your attention, and you just want to continue to be insensitive. Well, that's why you're going to continue to have problems.
But racism is cancel culture.
What do you mean by that?
It's a really insidious version of cancel culture. We won't even let you be equal.
Right.
We don't want you to think you're equal. We don't want you to have equal opportunity.
We don't want you to live in our neighborhoods.
For you. We don't want you living around us. We want you in prison, blah, 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 blah. I mean, had I knew this was the topic ahead of time, I've been meaning to write this. You would have
had I known that was going to be the topic.
Yeah, it's okay because we could circle to it at some point in the future. But I've been meaning to write this thing that explained why American society, and maybe even other societies around the world, I haven't lived in them all, obviously, are having an issue with race. It comes out of, basically, when we look at the United States, when European settlers came here and they saw the Native Americans or First Nations people here, they thought, oh, well, some of them thought, not all, we can take advantage of these people and take this land from them because they don't deserve it. They're savages, they're animals, right? They made the mistake of thinking they were better than the people were here, and their greed reinforced their behavior. And so systematically, they begin killing those people off, buying the land for cheap in some cases, which is probably a more honest thing to do than killing people. But we've all heard the stories. Sadly, I think future generations won't hear the stories of how these settlers would give blankets that were infested with smallpox to Native American tribes, and it would kill them off. They had no immunity for it, So, but over time, when the Africans were enslaved by other Africans who thought, oh, we can make a buck, or we're better than this group or that group, or they lost in a war and sold their captives, that sort of thing. Somebody thought it was okay to bring those people to further enslave those people or keep them enslaved and then sell them and make them work for free, blah, 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 blah. So in the United States, when you had things like slaves were seen as lesser people, the mindset that you can oppress them easily because they don't deserve to be on your level, because they're not on your level, or God made them differently. Hold on a second. I'm sorry, guys. I'm broadcasting. So because it's thought like, right, that's dyed in the wool. This is the way it is. God made us this way. God made them that way. And we're just better. So as slavery ended, as slavery ended, and sorry about the background, guys. I didn't tell them I was
It's all
podcasting
right.
today. As slavery ended and Black people could go ahead, and Native Americans who were enslaved too, were allowed to just be regular citizens again and just try to enjoy life to the fullest, right? Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. There were people who were against that because those people, again, they didn't see them on the level playing field. And so they took opportunity away, or they forbade them from doing things. Well, that made those people, some of those people in that generation and those generations, less happy. That made some angry. That made some not want to try as hard. Now, this is the foundation of a lot of the problems we see today, because you take a modern day guy who's growing up in the hood. I grew up in the hood. Who's growing up in the hood, who doesn't see his life having any prospects because he's not a good enough basketball, football player. He cannot rap, but he can probably rob and steal okay. If he thinks that's all he will ever be able to do in this society, because there's a group of people stopping him from sitting at the corporate table, right? Who will make sure he will never make it to the board of directors. So if you have this group of people who are looking to do that, right? We don't want him to go to a good school. We don't want him to go to a good college. If they don't want the best for that person, what they're saying is, we're happy to house you in a prison to keep you away from the rest of us because your behavior is not good enough. It's not safe, right? To be around the rest of us who want to live in a safe, secure society. If the plan instead had been, look, we realize you people have been oppressed for a long time. You're Native Americans, Black people. We got all these immigrants coming here from all over the world. Let's work together to make sure people can be at their best. If that was the plan, this would be a very different society. We'd have far fewer prisons. There'd be the societal ills. You can just bet there'd be less of every society's ills, because what? The structure is designed to take the individual, regardless of their ethnicity, and make sure you give an environment or create an environment where that person can be their best and feel accepted and challenge themselves to be the best they can be.
Yeah, but
we don't
want
have that.
They don't want that. We're not going
to. But you're a person who doesn't want that is a fool. A person who doesn't want that
you're preaching to the choir, but I'm just being honest. We don't have it because they don't want it.
Well, a person. Well, thank goodness a lot of people do.
Yeah,
because a person who wants, I look at like a Klansman or whatever, who thinks this group or that group is lesser than him, and so they actively oppress. You don't have to be a Klansman for that, but they actively oppress another group. They are making it worse. They are not making it better, because we see it in these mass murders that go on. A person has become charged against this or that group, even their co-workers, right? And so they lash out and become exceedingly destructive in their reaction, rather than being challenged. Look, you don't see it the way we do. What are your ideas? I put a Facebook post about gun control. I ask a simple question. What are the ideas? Without taking away guns, what can be done to lower these crime rates? Because people don't want to give up their guns. Because why? They feel insecure. Some of them, the gun makes them feel powerful. Others, they have the gun because they're afraid. It's a big difference between those two.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, somebody might, I guess there's the way where some of those people have a gun because they're insecure, but the gun makes them feel like they're a badass, or they can be. That person's probably more in the dangerous category than just the simple homeowner. Like, I'm surrounded by people.
Well, yeah, because they're the person fantasizing about using it. All right, I don't want to get too off topic. Let's let this tape roll.
Make yourself right again in the public sphere. At least personally, I feel like I don't see that a lot with cancel culture. Is if someone makes amends, there's now an acceptance like, hey, you did something wrong, but you're okay now, or at least better.
I think social media kind of incentivizes against redemption, and I feel like it's just outrage, and I do think people do like the rush of anger. I don't think people really believe in redemption anymore. I guess, just kind of disagree with the idea of racism as a binary. It kind of goes back to that like really old meme where like Skipper says like, we did it, Mrs. Obama, racism is over. The idea of a redemption is just like, all right, they've fixed their racism, in the sense that like, I think the redemption that our society is calling for is impossible. It's almost like you need to like write a check every time you make a racism, and like that will absolve you of your thing, where I think like what we should be doing is like the idea of growth towards a better understanding.
I have struggled with
I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that means.
No, I agree with that guy. A grow towards better understanding. What we see now with these different school districts banning books, saying we're not going to allow any teaching of critical race theory, or even subsections of critical race theory, where they just are afraid to admit the past of this nation was ugly. It's ugly now, but it might be the prettiest it's ever been in about 600 years.
But I don't think he was. I don't know. I don't think he was saying that. I think he's one. It sounds like he's saying we should. Let me listen to what he said again.
Is impossible. It's almost like you need to agree with the idea of redemption anymore. I guess, just kind of disagree with the idea of racism as a binary. It kind of goes back to that like really old meme where like Skipper says like, we did it, Mrs. Obama, racism is over. The idea of a redemption is just like, all right, they've fixed their racism, in the sense that like, I think the redemption that our society is calling for is impossible. It's almost like you need to like write a check every time you make a racism, and like,
yeah, like to me, this dude's just railing against wokeness.
So I think the producers have made a mistake here, and I don't mind you shading these people out, but the changing of their voices, so many of them sound the same. They're saying different things, but they sound the same.
Oh yeah, they sound the same from person to person. Yeah.
That's not helping.
Well, it's because you can't perceive the pitch variation as well down there. But yeah, and so yeah, I just think this is a weird thing to say.
Absolve you of your thing, where I think like what we should be doing is like the idea of growth towards a better understanding.
That's fine. It just felt vague to me.
So see, I agree with that guy. What we should be doing is growing towards a better understanding.
What bothers me is he's making it sound like people aren't interested in redemption, and I think there's a lot of false ring narratives, and I think part of what I hear when I hear a lot of guys talk is like, we're dealing with a lot of bad faith actors, and these guys adopt their narrative, and then it's like they want to meet in the middle on stuff that really isn't that complicated. And I think people are interested in redemption. The problem is people don't try to redeem themselves. The problem is people say a dumb thing, and then they just double down on the dumb thing. I think people are interested in redemption. I think people do forgive people when they say they made a mistake. The problem is people don't admit that they made mistakes. People don't apologize sincerely. People won't stop. We live in a society where people double down after somebody confronts them on something insensitive. Then they make a whole goddamn argument about it, and then they turn that. I don't know. It just seems like.
Some people do pocket locker. Some people.
Okay,
do.
but I mean, there's
they're typically not the ones that are the most frustrating. I think that's what you're driving at. The ones that seem to frustrate you are the ones who can't dial it back and say, you know what? Thank you for showing me the error of my ways. I think I need to consider this a bit more and maybe reframe my perspective, and truly gain a bit more knowledge about the topic before I am so sure. I mean, even Jordan Klepper, who I enjoy seeing his interviews and the Good Liars with Trump supporters, some of them, the light does come on, and they don't double down or triple down. They don't stand there and remain hypocritical when someone has shown them, like, you know what, you're inconsistent in your thinking.
Right.
So if I were to go to this local church, we have this massive church near my house. It's really beautiful. If I were to go there and ask morality questions, challenge the morality of the Bible, right? Is it ethical to kill all the people in the world except for 8 people? Is it ever ethical? Now, there are a number of adults who would probably say, well, if it's God's choice, but let me get down to the people in their early 20s and the teens. And they're going to say no more often than they'll say yes.
Right.
Then let me ask the kids that are the first graders, second graders, the Sunday school age kids. And I'm sure it would be rare to find one that would agree that killing everybody, almost everybody on earth, is the best way to manage your frustrations.
Right. Yeah. No, they and that's part of what I mean. They know. They just dance around
I
it when it
have
comes to
struggled
God.
with my sexuality.
I felt an attraction to men really young, and but I didn't connect to gay culture at all. And I was like, I'm either straight or gay. It can't be another one. So I very consciously put myself in the closet, and I didn't feel confidence to like be my own person, obviously in high school. And slowly but surely, I started to come out to more people and talk about my experience and stuff. But people come out of the closet, that's one thing. That's the second step. The first step is like really kind of like acknowledging it and like loving yourself. And that was the hardest part for me. And I'm pretty good now. I'm happy and bi.
Now, very comfortable with my sexuality, and I know it's a spectrum, but I think I'm, for the most part, straight. I struggled with depression for a long time, and I think one of the side effects of that for me was I fell into an eating disorder, and I got really skinny, and because I was struggling with an eating disorder, it made me, for some reason, question my sexuality. And I understand how messed up that is now. I started to ask myself, why did you associate that one with the other? And I think it was because it's just not largely talked about with straight men that we can still struggle with mental health and eating disorders.
I have a very core memory, somebody might say, of me walking in to my house after the first day of first grade, and I'm just like, hey mom, I think I have a crush on my friend. And my mom kind of laughed, and she's like, oh, boys don't have crushes on boys. And I was like, cool, got it, awesome. Just put that in the back of my mind.
Damn,
and I'm still working with like the idea that if I have a crush on a man, that's not inherently disgusting, because what's more disgusting than a man wanting you? Or like you said, like connecting to the gay community, unless you fit like, it seems the tiniest of boxes, is really hard. And even now, like I went out last night and I had somebody that I kind of like caught my eye, but I had no idea how to approach that. It's like everybody else got like a manual and like 17 easy steps to not have social anxiety when in the club. And I'm just like, I guess I was sick that day. I didn't get that class. I didn't sign up for it on LinkedIn. Just, sorry, I'm using humor to cover it up.
I went up to a guy and said, you're so handsome. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds like I'm an old woman. They're like, you're so handsome.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, obviously don't say that, but it's like, okay, but then what do you say? Because like, do I not think that he's handsome? I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you ever been confused by consent before?
I wanted to hear the rest of the dude stuff.
This next one isn't. This is a poorly phrased question. I'm interested to see if anybody actually answers this the way they wanted to. Consent for what?
Oh, we
There have been
know.
instances where, in terms of friends, relationships, whatever, I can go too far because I misinterpreted consent, and just because people seem comfortable with something, you kind of go along with it.
Yeah, I think the reason I said yes was just thinking very specifically about situations where both of us have been really drunk or something like that, where it's like, it's not one person's sober and the other person's drunk and the drunk person's saying yes, but if you're both drunk and both consenting and into it in the moment, and then the next day, like I've had like neither of us really consented. Is anybody in the wrong here? And so that's kind of what I thought of when I heard I've been confused about consent. It's not as much in the moment, but after the fact in that scenario.
Jack, that situation is pretty scary because you interpret it one way, and if someone was hurt and you didn't mean to do that, and you didn't take the precautions for that, you're still at fault. And That sucks. And I'm not saying that's your situation.
Yeah.
That's like that's the kind of world we live in, where we can really get in trouble sometimes, even when we don't mean to hurt others, and it sucks.
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing about consent is it's not always just like this guy being like, oh, come on. Like, you know, there's such a finer line. There's so many gray areas that it's really important to have those conversations because, yeah, there can be so many different scenarios that are still non-consensual, so.
Women have more power than me.
Yeah, I definitely don't think women have more power, and I think some people might think that just because you're seeing a growing relative power that, you know, some men might not be used to. Now that women are kind of getting closer to being equal to some people that might feel like they're getting more power and they might be more powerful. And so I can understand why someone might, you know, perceive that as relative, but absolutely I don't agree that like women have more power. I think we're getting close.
I think it's really interesting that he is articulating this so well with regards to sex and gender, and I would have liked to hear this be more clearly articulated when we started talking about race. And it's for some reason, like, I find that there's such an aversion to discussing racism. Like, we brought up race, and to me, it was immediately, they just put themselves in the position of a white guy who said something racially problematic, and let's take it from there with the defense, instead of like showing that you comprehend like differences in what's going on in society, differences in institutional structure, differences in, you know, wealth, economic, like there was no conversation about race. It was just like, all right, let me assume I'm a white guy, said something problematic, and let's talk about why is all this cancel culture? What about my path back to redemption? Like, I just would have loved to hear something like this. Yeah, you know, we got programs and stuff that are helping historically excluded populations, but overall, clearly, you know, just something like this. This was nice.
Closer to equality at this point, where it's a work in progress.
I don't know. It's like a yes and no question. I was harassed by a superior who was a woman at a previous job, like repeatedly harassed. I reported it to my boss, who was a white male, and he just laughed it off and said, you know, toughen up, Buttercup. When women are harassed, I think if I was a woman and I reported harassment, especially right now with Me Too and everything, CEO would see a huge red flag, a huge possible controversy, and like, I know there's definitely, you know, ways when that isn't true, but for me it was just like, we don't care. You're a man, toughen up. I don't give a shit. Like, she's a woman. She can't harass you. And it was really hard. I'm sorry. And I was really scared, and like, if I didn't have some, you know, good women in my life and some good people, I wouldn't have taken action. I would have just toughened up, and I would have let it kill me inside.
Sorry that happened. I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I've had fantasies.
Weird, man.
Oh, okay. So I said yes because like I can't think of a specific time, but like I believe I have at one point. It's more like role playing under very strict guidelines, and with the understanding that my partner will stop if I ever get too uncomfortable.
It's a very common fantasy. I'm really surprised that there wasn't more. I think if you'd asked a room full of women, you would have seen a much higher. You would have seen a much higher. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really common.
Is there
It's not
women were 100% on the
I don't think it would matter that much. I think it's like, even if you read, it's a common plot line in romance novels. The difference is it's not someone that they're not attracted to. The idea is it's like the man you want that's just not gonna take no for anything. Well, you wouldn't have said no. It's weird, but yeah, I mean it's what was taught in college. Yeah, it's like it would come up in our class. Yeah, That's just surprising. Because again, I just think it's a common fantasy. I'm not saying anything about the actual behavior, obviously.
In terms of like fantasizing,
But that could be part of it. I mean, it makes sense that it's out of that men would be more aversive to it. I don't know. I'd really love to see a study on it. It's the type of thing I think would be a fascinating area of research. You probably want to do like quantitative and qualitative stuff. So you'd want to figure out like frequency and intensity of fantasies, and then compare it to, say, small group discussions or long essays or interviews where people can tell you. But yeah, the way that our professor taught it when I was at Penn State was basically just saying that you see this a lot, and but it's usually someone that the person's attracted to. It's not like a weirdo off the street.
Actually doing the very illegal and immoral act, no. But I think, like role-playing, or even like the fiction you read, or even like to a certain extent, as long as it's ethically made, porn, like it's exploring that health.
And there's a whole consensual non-consent thing too in relationships. It's like a culture. It's definitely. I'm not gonna say more, but just the thing.
I think is valid, and it's something that I think I have done in the past.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I explore it in porn, but like personally, no. Like it freaks me out too much. I do have like this kind of feel of wanting to be dominated by a man, or a woman. That's more in porn than like in real life. I feel like I'd be freaked out in real life if that happened. But
so in this situation where you're doing this, like with your partner that you stated, are you the person that is receiving this idea of?
You're saying, am I playing the role of the assailant or the victim?
Yeah.
Okay. The role I am playing would be that of the assailant.
Of the assailant.
In that.
Okay.
And my partner would be the victim. Due to like social anxiety and like just a lot of things that keep me like a more like docile and submissive person, I like exploring a more dominant side via power dynamics in a safe environment, obviously.
When you're assaulted, like sexually assaulted, you don't have a choice in the matter, but when you are role-playing it, you can say, like a safe word, and you have the control.
Right.
But when it's that control's robbed from you, it messes with you. I think that's the distinction with the role play.
I feel like we kind of have a misunderstanding here. I at least think that it's really insensitive, at least, to be doing these role plays, because you will never be able to feel what these people feel, and like it kind of it's off shifting to know that that's something desired.
I understand that, and like
you can say no,
like
bro.
I said,
You can just be like,
like,
sorry, I'm not into that.
My fantasy kind of might come from like a position of privilege, and I think that's why I'd like to explore it in a healthy way to figure out like why exactly I feel that way. And I understand like from the outset, and even like as I explain it, it has the potential to sound like incredibly like jarring and shitty.
The way you're explaining it though, like that's why I'm asking you questions, because I can instantly assume that you're a shitty person, but now that I see the way you spoke to me, and you obviously have some feelings about it that you've thought to yourself over time. So like I just want to
I appreciate that.
And I think that the way we handled it is kind of a good way to communicate with others and understand issues.
I appreciate the way you ask the questions and stuff like that.
Thank you.
I have been abused.
Yeah, I mean, I've been.
I've been going through it. You go through it.
No, I think I've just been abused.
You're right. They all sound the same. It's so annoying. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. So the producers of this show,
but not physically.
I don't know if they noticed it or not.
Definitely emotionally.
It's like they put them all to the same exact pitch instead of just shifting. I don't know. They could.
Well, you can't have them sounding like this, can you?
I know,
they sound like they're from the Lollipop Guild.
It's really weird.
I think they probably would have been safe to have their natural voices used.
Yeah.
And then been asked, we asked you 20 questions. Are there any of these that you would prefer to remove your answer from out of fear, that someone could recognize your voice and, and you
Yeah.
get punished for it somehow.
They do this for most of them, but it's a little bit easier to keep track of who's talking. I'd have to compare this to the other ones, but yeah, it's driving me
I've
crazy.
been abused as like an employee to an employer. Again, not sexually or physically, but just abused their power over me.
As I talked about, I got harassed by an older female employee, and working through it, it's always a process. I don't know.
My family, we've endured emotional, physical abuse from my father, and I'm sure a lot of people can, attest and say the same things. And he lives in a whole nother country now, so I don't really talk to him. And I need that guidance. When I'm going from 14 to 18 years old, that's like a really influential time. So it's really hard to have to deal with that on your own. The worst part was when I told him about some of the issues I have because I didn't have him because of the way he, hurt me. He kind of just said, yo, that's your fault. Like, you can't blame me for that and put it on me. I think this kind of ties into, I want to bring it in how sometimes I feel like as a white man, I can't really talk about my problems because you've always been taught to suck it up. And I'm sure all of us have been told that multiple times in your life.
I'm really happy he said that. I think people, I don't give a hoot what color you are. You should talk about your problems. You find somebody safe that's a great listener, an active listener that you can talk about your problems with. I think one of the reasons we're seeing a statistic I heard is there's now been in 2023 more mass shootings than there have been days in 2023. What if someone had sat down and said, I'm having a real problem. I'm struggling with this and this, and I'm afraid of my own, the potential for me to act out, act my pain out, make others feel my pain. If it could just be known widely that it was okay to talk to someone who can help you process what you're going through, so you don't have to lift whatever. You don't have to lift a knife. You don't have to take your gun or go get a gun and some bullets and do something horrible. I'm glad he said that because it just absolutely should be okay. And I think from a very early age, people need to be able to understand that it is okay.
It's hard for me.
Practice of talking it through, huh?
It's hard for me to hear him say it, to be honest. I get what he's saying, and I think it's a problem. People, there's the perception that men are not encouraged to talk about their feelings, and I think that perception is real. How well it maps to reality, I don't know. I certainly don't think it's a unique problem to men because, again, I just think everybody probably deals with that. Like, we were watching a great video on Gather about what it means to be ladylike, and that was the same thing. I mean, it was like you can't, but it's hard for me to hear because I feel like I deal with a lot of racism on the internet every day, and I'm constantly being people coming at me for showing my feelings. Like, a lot of what I've been doing with the last couple of weeks is people telling me, getting mad that I'm upset about racism, people telling me that I'm not affected by it, people telling me that I'm being a drama queen for saying that I've been affected by it. So it's just hard because I've been listening to a lot of white dudes who've just quite frankly made my feelings feel unwell. I'm just being honest with you. So it's just kind of like,
no, it's okay.
It's like if y'all are not comfortable talking about your feelings, who the fuck is? Because y'all seem to take to the interwebs and the social media all the time to let us know not only what you feel, but what you feel about everybody else. Matter of fact, I wish they would shut up about what they think about everybody else. But I feel him, right? If he was sitting in front of me, I'm like, yo, like you said, of course, man, everybody needs to talk about your feelings, and I get that he probably really does feel like he's been discouraged from talking about his feelings, especially talking about the abuse he's felt. Like, I don't talk about the abuse I've gone through for the same reasons. Like, it's not a comfortable thing to do. so I'm not trying to be insensitive to the man, but yeah, it's hard to hear. Just because a lot of this has been hard to hear. I don't even like the questions they were asked, but we're almost done, so I'll get to that afterwards.
Suck it up. Buttercup, I heard over here one. So yeah, for you, I remember with your boss telling you that, you know, that wasn't valid, and that's not fair.
I don't think just because you're a man or white, you can't be abused. I was told that growing up.
I think abuse kind of requires a power dynamic, and like even like all of us, we're white men. There's always somebody above us. There's a richer, whiter man, I guess. So like, what is exactly the top? Because there's always somebody, I think, above us to abuse us, and that's just not really talked about.
Really quickly, I just want to do one thing. There's going to be no talking. It's the last question I have, and you cannot elaborate on your opinion either way, is the era of white men is over.
Really wanted to elaborate on that.
Yeah, that's a good
I'm
one.
sure they did. I'm sure
Pause
they
it.
did. So yeah, I don't. Go ahead.
I don't think white people are going to be cast into the white men, whatever, are going to be cast into the, to put it in biblical terms, the outer darkness.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
ridiculous. I think the idea, the current idea, is for true unity and not to have all the divisions continue where they just don't benefit us as a society. Yes, each person, I guess it's kind of like the Borg, one of the greatest lines in all of fiction. We will add your uniqueness to our own. Beautiful line, very intelligently written. And that's what a society is. Each person's uniqueness is added to the collective society. But you work towards a common goal. And that common goal shouldn't be the destruction of this group or that group, the people in this group or that group. Maybe there shouldn't be a Ku Klux Klan, because all those guys should realize we're not doing anything to benefit society. This is just anger club. You know, they sit down and just be angry about this or that, but they're not helping anything. They're not resolving anything. And there are other groups that I don't even know their names. They're the same way. Just a bunch of people gather together and just be angry about the way things are, as opposed to someone saying, hey, let's get a plan, a non-destructive plan that will make our society a better place, our community a better place. One where people won't feel left out, so they don't start a hate group that is enduring over, hundreds of years.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. There was something dissatisfying about that. I wish they were asked harder hitting questions or given more direction on issues, because I felt like I don't know. It just, I was hoping that it was going to be sort of. I think they did a good job with the one with Christians, because they hit on all the hot button issues, and then it's like they went right for it, and it gave you this kind of mask off effect of, all right, this is hearing them in their own words. Whereas like with this, I felt like the questions were soft, and then they took them all to like weird places, and so I don't know. I don't know. Just I don't know. Somebody didn't sit right with me, but it's.
Well, you've already heard me criticize the questions weren't very good.
Yeah,
I think in some cases, and I think with a group like that, you can ask them. It would have been nice had they opened it up to the group to submit their own questions. Now that you've heard each other speak on this, do you have any questions for the whole group?
Or something.
Because then,
or let some people of color ask the questions, or something. Because to me, the questions were just weird. They were just a little weird.
Well, maybe they went around the office to get the questions. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not a television producer. It's not what I do. Not my world. So, but I think society needs to have conversations like that one. I think they're very important. One of the things I've been looking into recently is the school board meetings. Maybe not why you think. In my area, there's a lot of open land, and now they're starting to build homes here. I don't know how much longer I'm going to own this house, but I don't want to pay a dime more for all the new schools that are going to have to be built. At least 3, at least an elementary, a middle, and a high school will need to be built. Well, I don't want my property taxes to go up for that. You assess that tax on these new homes, not me. So I want to be able to say that, right, to the county board of commissioners and all this stuff and the school board. Like, let those new people pay for that. I'll continue to pay for the stuff that was here when I got here. But I also want to know what the parents have to say about the educating of their children. And I was surprised to see that in the sort of the rules of conduct for attending these meetings, you're not supposed to put another person down for their religion, for their ethnicity, their how they identify, like male, female, what have you, non-binary, and sexual orientation. Like, that's not the issue. And so I'm like, if they could think of that here in Mayberry, where I live, why do I see so many videos where people utterly are disrespectful on those very same terms? How can it be that here in the peaceful valley, the people who wrote out I don't know what the meetings are like, but the people who wrote the rules got it right, and so many other people get it wrong? How can it be?
Yeah, I don't know, but also I don't think you're gonna win on your tax thing. That's how this works. Like when there's more people, they build more schools and they tax people for it.
Right, you can tax them more, but don't tax me more.
They're gonna tax you more if you're in the district.
If it's LA unified, where it's all of Los Angeles, the impact on me is minimal. If it's just valley-wide here, the impact on me is not minimal. Yeah, because I pay more than almost all of my neighbors in property tax. I might pay more than all of my neighbors in property tax because a lot of them have been here a lot longer than I have and paid a lot less for their homes than I did. So we'll see.
All right, let me go over to this other video. I think is actually this one's really great on this, and it's sort of where some of that statistics came from about segregation.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's share here. I think that's the right one. Yeah.
The truth is that racism absolutely does hurt everybody. When we think about it in a broader societal context of the destruction that discrimination does and all that we lose, including white people, because we're trying to keep people out of the process. I am always just so confused, but psychologically curious about what is going on inside of the minds and hearts of white folks who are good people that still succumb to stereotypes and bigotry.
Right. Now, this is the thing. I have no idea how much those guys that we just watched get this. Do they understand that at the top of the power structure is still white men? And again, it's weird that they hit him with that one question that was worth elaborating on. Is the era of the white man over? But that's the one question they couldn't elaborate on. I mean, it was a weird. I feel like a little bit clickbaited, but it also just felt a little bit like this is the problem with white men. You can't even provide a mask off anonymity moment and really ask them the challenging questions that need to be asked publicly. It's weird, but I would have liked to hear them vocalize an understanding of what oppression, racism, down the list actually looks like and how it works in the real world. And I don't know that they know. And I don't think they do. It seems to me they think racism is about cancel culture, and they're going to get mad because they posted, a problematic comment on social media. And it's like, is that what they think this is about?
Racism is the original cancel culture. I'm telling you, it's the original cancel culture.
I mean, it is, but I don't even go there.
Bias in their soul and how they get there, because they don't really mean to be there. I recently sat down with
that's what
Color
they're
Change
not talking
board
about.
chair and New York Times best-selling author Heather McGhee, who breaks it all down and really speaks empathically about what white people might be experiencing in America. Take a look. So, Heather, I often think about the what turned out to be a beautiful encounter that you had with Gary from C-SPAN, where he called in and was obviously, trying to rationalize or deal with his feelings that he knew were racist, and you had an interesting interaction with him. And I think about this so much right now because we're seeing so many instances of white people having a reckoning where, they're like, oh, whatever, what I believe is what I believe. And then they kind of realize, oh, maybe I'm racist. And then, are trying to figure out some tools and resources to deal with that. So I wanted to start off by asking you, for those of the viewers who have not heard about your experience with Gary, if you would just start off by giving us a little synopsis of that caller and what happened.
So this was 2016, Aisha, and I was on C-SPAN on a live television show that has callers. And I was talking about what I talk about, which is the economy, jobs, taxes, student debt, wages. And yet I'm a Black woman, right? So race is always on the agenda. And so one of the callers called in and identified himself as Gary from North Carolina. And his first words were, "I'm a white male and I'm prejudiced." Now, Aisha, this is live television, right? So I just have to react in the moment, listening to hear him talk about Black men and drugs and gangs and crime. And I'm like, okay, here we go. But you got to fix your face, right? Fix your face. And I'm listening, but I hear something in his voice. And by the end of his comment, he says, but I want to change. And I want to know what your guest, meaning me, can what advice she can give me to help me become a better American. So when he said that, honestly, something cracked open in me. And I thought, you know what, this is an opportunity. He really wants to change. And he knows that somehow being less racist will make him a better American.
So this is making me think of racist dads I dealt with growing up, or racist parents in general, because, boy, it was moms too. Sometimes the moms were worse. But there were some of them that sought to get to know me and change their tune over time and became real allies. But it's again shit I shouldn't have had to been doing as a child.
And I can get with that. So I said thank you for admitting your prejudice, because so few people do, and it's very powerful to do that. And then I gave him some tips about how he could sort of integrate his life and unlearn some of the brainwashing that people have in this society of all backgrounds, frankly, the anti-Black brainwashing that goes on. And so that exchange between Gary and me went viral. It was seen tens of millions of times. I ended up meeting Gary, and he ended up really going on a path in his own life to become less racist. Now, I learned some things about where racist ideas come from, right? From my friendship with Gary, my racist caller, that I think are very relevant to what's going on today.
So I want you to break down some of that, because I think about all of these nice, good white people, right, who, don't have a racist bone in their body, and frankly, because I always think in political terms, are voting Democrat, and even might align some of them, they with progressive values. They may not all be from the South and have, these Southern roots that are suspect at best. I think about the so-called Central Park Karen, right?
Sir, I'm asking you to stop recording me.
Please don't come close to me.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to me.
And I'm taking a picture and calling the cops.
Please call the cops.
Who she's like, I don't know why you guys are all coming for me. I'm a Democrat. What? And then I think about, the white women in their tears, the lady who has the meltdown, complete meltdown in the lingerie store, and then the white woman who just completely almost assaulted, but like freaked out on a boy because she said he stole her phone and got the hotel manager to apprehend the boy, and his father was there, and it turns out it wasn't her phone in the first place. But these are, white people who, with all intents and purposes, probably wouldn't start off like Gary and say, well, I'm so-and-so, and, well, I guess I'm racist because I think these things. And I wonder, what are some of your learnings about what's happening inside of white folks as they are dealing with black people that they react so viscerally?
Here's a few facts that are helpful to understanding the state we're in today. 75% of white people have no black people in their close personal network. 75, right? We're still.
Now that's the figure I was thinking of when I said that today white people are the most segregated. 75% don't have any black people in their lives.
Well, they could watch our show and have at least one black friend.
And one black friend. And again, and I hate to keep bringing it up, but y'all, I was born in 1986. I grew up in the 90s, right? I graduated high school in 2004, right? I was the only black kid in my high school when I graduated. I was the only black kid at 3 different schools. Right? People talk about desegregating the schools like that shit happened back in the 60s. No, I was desegregating schools in the 21st century. I just want, come on, y'all, to get real with the times now. Get real
Still
with
a
it.
highly segregated
So I ain't talking about
country,
the,
and
I always
white
tell
people
people, I ain't reading about black history. I'm making black history.
As I listen to her, I have to reflect back on different encounters I've had in my own life. I think it's simple to understand to some degree. It's fear-based. And the caller that she's referring to, I would really be interested in hearing their conversations, because I'm sure that came out. Fear and ignorance, what he had been told, he may have been afraid of. He might have had some encounters with black people that were just awful. Maybe somebody mistreated him. Maybe multiple people mistreated him multiple times. And so his perspective is chiseled in stone. That's how they all are, which he already knew. If he made that decision based on that, he already knew it wasn't true.
Right.
But it would protect him.
Mm-hmm.
If I isolate myself from these people, I'm unlikely to have another incident like that again, which also is probably not true.
Right. So the father
get it from somebody else, somebody who looks more like he does.
It was not uncommon for the parents of somebody I was dating coming up to have been around in like a big school district when it was desegregated, sort of en masse, if you will. And there was a lot of race riots. There was a lot of racial fighting, right? It was always like, and so that history, is what made them, it was like their justification. It was like, you have to understand, I'm not racist because I'm a bad guy. I don't want you dating black guys because when in my high school, the black guys and the white guys were just, at each other's throats constantly. But that was how they justified it. It was like they had that fear response that, we cats and dogs don't play in the same pen type of mentality.
And yet you can watch YouTube videos of cats with dogs. Yeah. I think it comes down to, like Gary, the caller, did for her. Gary wants to come out of his shell. Gary is smart enough to know he's cutting himself off from a lot of he could have more beauty in his life if he weren't so cut off. I had an incident when I was 16 years old. I was going to the National Junior Classical League in Indiana convention in Indiana, Pennsylvania. And so me and some other people, or some other Latin students, the language Latin, not like we're Latinos or something. We got on a bus and boom, off we go. And we're traveling across the states and we stop at this hotel. We're going to stay the night at the hotel. So me and a bunch of my new friends, some of these people I think maybe only one or two of them I'd ever met before. We go and we're hanging out, we're having a good time. And my roommate, Mike, and I had the door to our hotel room open. And our friends had just left. This truck pulls up, not a tractor trailer, just, pickup truck pulls up, and this man gets out and he sees me and he storms into our room with his dog and closes the door. This is exactly what you don't want to happen. But it was whatever. I'm Mr. Let's call it a victory. He then introduces himself and his dog. He says, "I want to talk to you." I'm 16 years old. Generally, the people that want to speak to me are purchasing a bicycle, or they want me to make their biscuits and gravy instead of somebody else, or they want me to make their food over at the places that I work. Well, I want to talk. That's what that meant to me, or they're happy about something I did. This was a completely different tone that I'd only ever heard my mother use. So I say, sure. Now, I've heard of, in events like this, just remain calm. And the calm person generally controls the conversation, not the loudest person. So, okay, I sat there and Mike was sitting on his bed like, what the F is happening? And he's wondering, should I call 911? What's going on? Neither one of us, none of the three of us, except for the guy, he knew what was going on. We didn't. It says, I have a problem. This guy had been drinking. You could smell the alcohol on him. I have a problem and I need your help. Completely changed the tone. If I'm recalling it right, the next words out of his mouth were, "I don't like Black people." And then my inner monologue was, holy shit. How's this going to go? Because Mike isn't Black. The guy's got a brown dog, a dog with brown fur. And then there's me, the only Black person in the room. And he says, my daughter is in the military. He goes on with this story, how his daughter is in the military. She met a man who's a Black man. She fell in love with him. And she wrote to her father that he proposed and they would like to get married. And she wanted her father's blessing. I had to ask him, what's the problem with that? Again, I don't like Black people. I said, do you trust your daughter?
Right.
Yes, I do. Did you raise a good woman? He goes, yes, I did. Well, if she finds him a good man, why wouldn't he be one? This man, myself, and I'm thankful to my roommate, Mike, even joined in the conversation. We must have talked for 2 hours. He never raised his voice again. He talked about the experiences, which were very few, that he had with Black people. And strangely, most of them had come from when he would go to clubs to listen to music, like jazz music or blues or country, and the band was Black. But he would go in there and he would dance around and with his friends, and sometimes he might dance with the Black woman who was there. But that would be like the length of the interaction. There's no taking one out to dinner later, nothing like that. But he spoke about how narrow his experience with Black people was. And it was out of his fear, his concern for his daughter, who is an adult, his ignorance, and to his credit, he came in that room wanting to kill his daughter and her future husband. And when he left, according to his own words and his tone, he was excited to meet this man and looking forward to his daughter's future with him. He said it. I'm glad I got a chance to talk to you because I wanted to kill them both when I got here. We can't be afraid, regardless of age, of having that conversation, knowing that it could be meaningful to people you will never know. Because this man, who knows how his life blossomed in a different way because he chose not to live out his anger. The actions he took on his anger and on his frustration was to seek understanding. Far be it from me to think I was the guy who was going to help him with that, but that's exactly what happened. So, as I have said before, everybody is an ambassador for better behavior in society. Everybody. So anyway, that's all I got to say about that.
All right, let's roll tape. Appreciate you.
The most segregated, meaning they are the least likely to live around anybody who is of a different background. So we're talking about ignorance here. And then, so the question is, where do people get their ideas about who Black people are? Right? Generations of racist stereotypes, all of them, virtually all of the anti-Black stereotypes that are in our culture today were created deliberately in order to rationalize slavery and Jim Crow, right? The idea that Black people are lazy, created as a justification for then chaining people, torturing them to force them to work, right? You have to have the idea that Black folks wouldn't want to work on their own. They're just too lazy, so they have to be enslaved in order to do so. The idea that Black people are more criminal, that allows for there to be a state of constant policing, which of course is a moneymaker. So it really all comes down to economic justifications, and racist stereotypes are those used to justify those economic policies and practices. But today they live on. They live on in our media. They live on in our nightly news, which overrepresents crime committed by Black folks and underrepresents crime committed by white folks. It lives in the idea that Black people are more criminal when, in fact, if you control for poverty, crime rates are the same, rural, urban, suburban, right? It's really about poverty. And so when you look at all of these issues and you think about how rife our society and our cultural programming is with these stereotypes, that's underneath the surface. But then, of course, you have Beyonce and Jay-Z, you have all these interracial ads for Crest toothpaste and Tide, right? You've got this sort of weird thing where there's both all these subterranean anti-Black stereotypes, and then, according to recent research out of the University of California, we're more likely today.
Can you pause it? It's a great story. Because I don't know what the point is. What's the good point? What's the good point?
Oh, these Christianized, an unbeliever said these Christianized names we wear and the slave speak we use. Yeah, it's just history of it. It's baked into our culture, and it's there's so many ways people don't even realize, and it is helpful for us to try to highlight these things. I get so tired of it. It's an incredibly exhausting fight, especially when you feel like you're surrounded by people who just don't care and are not trying to understand. But there are people who are. It's just we all need to rest and take care of ourselves. And but for a lot of us, it's just frustrating because you. I don't know. I think for those of us that deal with it all the time, it's hard to understand that people really don't see it or they really don't get it. And then you're dealing with all the bad faith actors. And it's so stressful trying to decide who's who. And I know so many other people in our community that can relate to that. But the recent stuff was a perfect example where I knew from the first time I saw a particular person interacting in our space, this person's problematic. They're a bad faith actor. Nothing good can come of this. And I watched this person watch it take, a couple weeks for people to figure that out. It's very exhausting. It's just, but yeah, let's roll this tape.
TV shows, particularly by young people, to see Black people as being successful, right? Because there's sort of been this kind of wishful thinking, right? And maybe this sort of liberal Hollywood view of trying to present the world they want to see and to avoid negative stereotypes.
Yeah, like I think that's what gets me, and I notice that, and we all have different, and I don't want to. I'm not a. I see myself as a pessimist philosophically, like it's a mistake to think people are better than they are. Right? Like I'm someone who values, the predictive quality of information, right? I need to know who I can rely on and who I can't, right? So, to me, you just have to be reasonable with your optimism. But this is the thing. Because you just don't know, and it gets confusing. Like that's the thing. Like you go through the motions with people as if they are good faith actors, that there's someone you can count on, that they're acting good faith. But then a lot of times you realize they're not. It's super frustrating. Super frustrating. I don't want to ramble too much.
TV. And so there's this weird thing that's going on where white Americans overestimate how successful Black people are doing and how narrow the racial gaps are, sort of how much progress there's been economically. And yet there is still very deep and visceral and emotional fear of the Black other. And that's where you get these sort of liberal folks having this sort of cognitive dissonance between what they know they're supposed to think, meted through the ignorance of not actually having very diverse social circles, and then once an interaction that is full of conflict, misunderstanding comes into play, the lizard brain, right, the unconscious comes out, and it's all of those deep, deep stereotypes.
Oh my God, you just literally broke down the psychology of whiteness. Holy cow, Heather. So,
well, there's more. There's more to it.
I'm listening. Tell me more. Yeah.
Well, there's more to it in the sense that, listen, racism is the original wound in our society, and yet somebody keeps salting it, right? So if you think about in whose interest it is for there to be these anti-Black narratives, these anti-immigrant narratives. It is in the interest of people who want to see white Americans vote against their own economic interests, as I write about in my book, The Sum of Us, want to see Black, brown, and white people divided, even when we have a lot materially in common, even though we all want clean air, clean water, universal childcare, healthcare, right? Better funded schools. Those are things that all of our families want. There is a vested economic and political interest in creating this us versus them mentality, right? And so what you're starting to see is in, for example, debates about what children are learning in schools, these really authoritarian, fascistic bans on honest education that have become the law of the land in a dozen states in this nation in the 21st century, banning Toni Morrison, canceling Dr. King, ripping books about Ruby Bridges, a 6-year-old school integrator, off the shelves because white elementary school students somehow are too fragile to read such things.
And I just don't understand how it is that there are people who act like this stuff isn't happening. One of the things that I feel you have to do right now is you have to stand with our trans family members. They are being attacked in a crazy, powerful way that you just have to be living under a rock to not notice. And instead, we have fools that just are making content about it every day, debating people's identity, while their government in many places seeks to make sure they cannot live fulfilling lives. Literally deny them health care, literally deny their participation in activities and all of this nonsense, limit their public participation. Now, fuck up their IDs, whatever the issue is, cool. You got to walk and chew gum at the same time. How do you not acknowledge that all of these racially problematic things are happening, that there's clear efforts to marginalize Black voters, that there's clear efforts to deny students an education about Black history. So how do we solve this problem if 75% of white students don't know any Black people and can't read books about Black history? Please tell me how they get a clue about what's going on in the world.
Sure. I think you have to create in those students a thirst for knowledge. If you could find that, if you could reach that 75% and go through their closets, let's just take the males, go through their closets and say, I just want to see every jersey you have. Chances are, I would be willing to bet, and at least 50% of those people, they have a jersey with a Black person's number or name on the back. They have role models. They may never meet Michael Jordan or LeBron James, or I may never meet Drew Brees or something like that, or Buford McClurkins or something. But there was something about that athlete that reached them. There was something about that person's skill. I want to be like that, or that person epitomizes for me what an athlete truly is in terms of their life off the court, or on the court, off the field, on the field. There's something special about that person, and I identify with that. I think sports has done a huge service to, oddly enough, as has rap music, to making American society, a much better place, because there are people who you don't see in a bad light. You see them in a good light because you like their music, or you like their writing, or you like their movies or something like that, So I don't think all is lost, Pocket Locker.
I'm not saying all is lost, but there's a big problem here, right? And the problem is active, right? And people need to recognize there's a problem. If people can't talk about racism, you can't do anything about it. People have to recognize this is racist. And now we have to oppose doing this because doing so is racist. I'm not okay pushing us down the hill further because, well, we still can technically overcome it. Also, I got to be honest with you, these people are not breeding intellectual pursuit of desire. Of course, they're breeding them. Yes, you have a favorite Black receiver, whatever, but that's not going to lead to the bigger transformation unless they're actually enculturating those young people with a desire to learn. And if you're banning books, I don't trust your instinct to educate. I don't think people. I'm not saying you won't, but that's not evidence of it. If that's the only thing I got to go off, your educational instincts are highly problematic. But the bigger problem is that it's racist, right? Like that's my thing. It's racist. Like and that's what I'm saying. We have to be able to recognize what's going on in the world right now, and this is a problem, right? Because we're still dealing with racism, right? Like we pulled up a graph the other day, but the average white income family has about $170,000 of wealth, right? The average Black household has about 17,000. It's 10 times as much, right? It's like this is.
Are you
this
sure
is,
that isn't the average Jewish household 170,000?
Nope. It's just nope. It's not the average Jewish household. We're still dealing with an incredibly overly criminalized, overly, racialized justice system. We're still dealing with the fact that Black people's lives are at risk just for being Black people, from routine run-ins with the law to now knocking on the wrong door, pulling in the wrong driveway. So people have to be willing to recognize that the civil rights struggle isn't over. It didn't go away because there's a Black president. We're not affected by it because you have a particular education or you live in a particular neighborhood or home. So that's the thing. That's the thing for me. Of course, I'm optimistic that people will do good and do better, and we can do better, and we can push back against things like this, and whatever. You have to. So it doesn't matter to me if you're optimistic about it or not. Just what you got to do. But yeah, I just need people to be real, to just be able to stare racism in the face and know what it is. Because you can't be an ally unless you are. Like you got to know what we're dealing with, right? Like just like you got to recognize anti-trans bigotry, you have to recognize misogyny, you have to recognize racism.
That's really about a core narrative of us versus them, of a fear that white elites, and in this case, it really is a conservative electoral strategy, are trying to drive into the heart of particularly white suburban parents, right? They're not going to the far right on this. They're really trying to cleave away white suburban parents from the multiracial coalition that has put Democrats in power. And they're trying to say, fear this integrated public school. Don't trust your vulnerable white children in these spaces where they'll be learning from woke teachers, that they'll be learning alongside Black and brown children, because it's us versus them. It's our history that makes us the hero, or it's their history that makes us the villain. And of course, the truth is a lot more complicated than that. And we've got to trust young people to know the truth when they see it. We've got to arm them with the kinds of history that gives important lessons about the kinds of racism and scapegoating that's still going on today. And so we've got to fight back against that. But that's really what's going on. It's us versus them, that ultimately the beneficiaries of that are sort of right-wing political and economic elites who want to rig the economic system in their favor.
And that is the sum of us. Heather McGhee,
Is that? I don't know what that was. They had something on the set going on. Yeah, man.
It might be my background. I don't know. I got some wind here.
Brilliantly breaking it all down. I so appreciate you.
No, it's them. They got like a hammering or something going on back there. Maybe
that could be me.
Yeah, she could have been at home. All right, so yeah, I thought that was a really good video. I wish those guys were wish they got into more questions like that, but it's all good. But yeah, that's where I got that figure from, the 75. I was trying to remember where I pulled that number from.
Yeah, let me know.
But that's interesting. That's
oh, not the 75, the 170,000. That's more interesting.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's that came from a Sam Richards lecture. It's probably an older figure, but I think it was 2016 maybe or something. I'm not really sure. I have to look at the.
I couldn't believe it's that high. There's no way.
Yeah, it's an alarming figure. I probably could find it here. It's
not that it isn't. It's just that, I haven't read that, so. So what else you got for us video-wise to have a look at?
Nothing.
Nothing? Okay. Maybe we can take some, I don't know if there's comments or if one of our or a few of our audience members would like to come on. Maybe some of our audience members, regardless of their ethnicity, might like to answer some of those questions.
So this is the
in the first video.
This is the This is where I got that figure from. Yeah, it's 2016 median family wealth. So it's the median, not the mean. And I guess it's from the Federal Reserve Census. But yeah, it's 17 for black people, 171 for whites, nearly 10 times. And this is just a powerful figure for people to think about, because this is you know what I mean, like this is right. So they're nearly double everybody combined, right? But this is crazy. I mean, there's even a huge drop off between Asian and mixed, who are a lot of times doing a lot of multiple generations in the same home. But yeah, I mean, this is the issue, right? This is what you should not have. If you did not live in a racist society, you would not have one race that is 10 times the median wealth of another. And this is what leads to land gaps. And now think about this. Now 75% of them don't have any of us in their circle. Why? Because they live somewhere that hardly any of us can afford to live. And even when if my one black friend lives in a really nice area, for instance, that's, you know what I'm saying? That's the pebble thrown in the water. Like, right, there's one, right, it's rare. That's a rare bird.
Yeah, I'll say my neighborhood is rare. Like, this is what I think I live in a sociologist's dream. Like, wait, you have all this mix together in one place? Like, yeah, it's been like this before I got here. I didn't do anything, to enrich it, really. I just joined it.
Yeah.
But yeah, my neighborhood is extremely diverse, diverse.
And so that's not the case for most of America, especially not places where people have a lot of money. Those places tend to be pretty homogenous, and that's what then that's what leads to the problem. And then you wrap that up with so many of the economic elite are conservative Christians, and then they're the people who are leading the sort of anti-integration narratives, right? They're the ones banning the books. They're the ones trying to redline the districts, and it's a problem. And this is kind of what Stephanie talks about. Like, you get too comfortable thinking that we've solved these problems, or everybody's there's a lot of people on our side, a lot of people are trying to make the world a better place, but a lot of people aren't. Right? And sometimes you need the people who are fighting with you to recognize what you're really up against, because otherwise you end up thinking, oh, this is great. Look how much progress they made by Martin Luther King's time. Oh, look how much progress we made now. And then you get 50 years from now and you're still in relatively the same place. Like, so I don't know. I think most people need to focus on themselves, because these issues are out of scope for most of us, and there's only so much you can do. But for me, you'll at least, I think, be willing to do more if you really understand that we live in unacceptable times, right? We need to change the things. We really do. We really do. And it's funny too. Like, there's a lot of talk about people undermine my education because of my mental health, but then at the same time, they also tell me I'm like an elite or something. And it's like, I'm a junior postdoc. Like, I don't, it's very frustrating to me. I don't make a lot of money. And it bothers me that people assume I'm some kind of elite because I have a PhD. First off, it's like, or assume I'm not affected by racism because of that. I'm like, first off, say that to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., because he had a PhD as well.
It's a very different world you live in than the one he lived in.
Maybe, as far as black academia is concerned, not much.
Black academia?
Yeah. And nevertheless, I'm not an economic, it's just not true. And it's also, I don't know, it's a problem. I don't want to go on about it, but it's let's just to say the least, it's problematic to insist that people who have certain things about them, like, oh, they're educated, or oh, they have a nice car, or oh, they live in a nice neighborhood, that they're not still affected by racism. I just don't even understand where people get off on that. But yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
I want to comment on that. I think you can look at someone's circle, right? I had when I worked for Enterprise Rent a Car, I had this customer who was very wealthy, and he and I were talking, and he mentioned hanging out with his friends. Like, these are his old friends, like elementary school, middle school, high school. He goes, I want to go like take a trip here. My friends don't have the money to do that. And he was talking about how his friends didn't have his same means. And of course, money is freedom to some degree.
Right.
And I said, well, you have a choice. He goes, what's that? You pay their way or you get richer friends. And he looked at me and laughed. He goes, I'd never thought about either of those options. I said, just go ahead and do the things you want to do anyway. And you're going to meet people who are either that's their daily life or they're like you and they're at that level financially.
Right.
Where they can enjoy those sorts of things.
Right.
And this is whatever you do, don't get rid of your old friends.
Right.
You know, never stop hanging out with your old friends because they know you, they love you, and you love them. And you hit a hard time, well, the other multimillionaire, he might stop talking to you, but those guys never will.
Right.
And he just didn't look at it that way. He was not satisfied with where he was, his circle. So he sort of wanted to not be responsible for uplifting his circle. But I told him, I said, you got to be willing to educate those guys into your status, your financial status. And they got to want it, because if they don't want it, they're not going to get there.
Right.
They're just not.
Right.
You know, like I told you, I said it on a hot program, I now give away less money than I used to.
Right.
A lot less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm trying to change a few things, you know,
in
my own life. I could be retired in 2 years, could be retired at the end of this year. I don't know. So it can't be as generous.
Right. Right. Yeah. All right, man. Let's. Do you have any closing thoughts? I'm gonna try to get some food. I'm hungry.
Oh, sure. Well, the issue of racism in, I guess, all societies, I've traveled around a little bit, has long fascinated me. And there are places, I think you have to understand this, in the world where American culture is hugely influential. Not always in a way that you'd want. I'm in downtown Tbilisi, Georgia. This is like 2013 or something like that. So Tbilisi, Georgia is not in the United States. It's in like Eurasia. It's way over there.
Right.
And a guy walks up to me and says, "What's up, my N-word?" And I was like, what did you just say? And this guy starts talking to me. Do you know Snoop Dogg? Do you know this? And he's asking me, do I know all these rappers and stuff like that? The culture went from here to there. There's a whole lot of nuance he never picked up on because it was never introduced to him. In this same country, me and some friends, we went to this town called Signagi. Signagi's beautiful. It's in the Caucasus Mountains, and you are high on the earth. It's way up there, and just beautiful. And as we're walking into town, me and my Georgian friends, I see crowds of people coming out of buildings. They're on their cell phones. And I'm looking around wondering what the heck is going on. Like, is there a problem here? Is there an emergency or something? And my friend Zuka, he says, see, in this hillbilly town, this tourist town, you are now the main attraction because the only black person these people have ever seen is like Denzel Washington or Will Smith. You're there, Will Smith. So, and he's making a good point. One I didn't fully understand at the time. when I lived in their country, I was there, 4 months, like 3 months one time and 1 month the second time. When I was there, I rarely ever saw a black person. Like even people from Turkey that were there were generally much lighter skinned. Like you'd think that was just a white person if you saw them. Most people would. So it was a very rare thing. So for them, it wasn't just rare, it was special, because you could tell someone that I was there and they just wouldn't believe you. Like that just doesn't happen here. So there are all sorts of extremes, going to like Dusty Smith from the Cult of Dusty show, living in a neighborhood that is predominantly black. And for those of you who don't know Dusty Smith is a Anglo-Saxon American guy. He's been on YouTube forever and a day. But he talks about living in his neighborhood and how he gets along with his neighbors, but he grew up in a culture that was prejudiced, and that's not how he is. He had some rough spots, but the man he is today, he might be a good person to interview on this topic. The man he is today isn't like that. Right. He wants equality. If you're gay, straight, trans, whatever, ethnicity you have, it shouldn't be hard for you because you fit into one of those categories or you don't fit into another one. I think that's where most of us have to realize we need to help people get there. Right. I'm going to reiterate something I said. We're all ambassadors. We all are ambassadors, whether you want to be or not. So when you have an opportunity to guide someone into being a better person, do it. I don't know how you could how your time is better spent than that. So that's it. That's all I got to say, other than take care of yourselves
and each other. All right, gang. Love you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate y'all for being here. We'll catch you next time.
Next time. All right. Bye-bye.